Sai, thank you. Thank you very much, Harish. Sisters and brothers of Region 3, I'm very happy to be participating in this satsang today. We're doing it via technology, something that Swami used to refer to sometimes as tricknology. And that has a significance because it relates to the plus and minuses of virtually everything that we have in this world. There are some good points, but then there are some points that we have to be very careful about. And technology is certainly a prime example of that. Our previous get-together was way back in 2015 during your conference retreat in September. The memory of those 3 days, that memory is ever fresh in my mind. The lovely clock you gifted me at the end of the ceremonies, I keep in my here in my office. So I think about Atlanta and Florida and the Carolinas quite a bit during the weekdays. In so many ways, the Southeast region is dear to me, and I think part of the reason is due to the fact that I was born and reared in Jackson, Mississippi, at a time in our country's history when the fiercest and most brutal form of African-American oppression was sanctioned and enforced by the 13 southern states. Ironically, both those who were oppressed by that system and those who enjoyed the benefits of it revered the same book of scriptures and prayed to the same God form. But this irony was not particularly troublesome to most of us in my community, because our parents and grandparents tended to garner hope from the stories of Moses leading his people out of bondage and other stories in the Old Testament, and they especially derived great comfort and patience from the words and teachings of the blessed Lord Jesus. Nonetheless, many of us in the then younger generation, many of us experienced great difficulty understanding the discrepancy between what we saw going on around us and the benefit that faith and patience were supposed to bring about. In my own case, in my late teenage years, I simply decided to put on hold trying to understand. And rather, I just devoted my energies to taking advantage of the ever-increasing opportunities that were arising in response to the national and worldwide struggle to bring an end to racial oppression. And luckily, I came to enjoy a fair amount of success by worldly standards. And as I entered my 40s, it looked like things were just going really well. And they were in that sense. But then through an amazing series of hard to believe circumstances, I came to know of the presence on the planet of the same instance or same example of God having come into our world of reality in the form of a human. Very similar to what occurred 2,000 years ago. And as the awareness of the significance of that discovery started to settle in, to sink in, my joy just knew no bounds. It took another couple of years of almost daily excitements and soul rocking events. But in the course of time, I managed to arrive at a remote village in southern India, which was the physical headquarters or ashram of Lord Sathya Sai Baba. It was Christmas week of 1978. And I found there about 200 or so non-Indian or Western devotees, along with several thousand Indian and Asian spiritual aspirants. I traveled from the USA to India was rather smooth. However, negotiating the last link from Bombay to Bangalore via Indian Airlines was a nightmarish saga, with my being stranded in Bombay for 2.5 days. 2.5 days. Due to the confusion and weird, from my perspective, things about the state of domestic air travel at that time. But early on that morning, a young Indian man who had come just on another flight from the UK, came over and introduced himself to me there in the airport. And he informed me that he too was headed to see Sai Baba. And he made me the recipient of his family, his local family connections and hospitality there in Bombay. The details of that portion of the story would take too long, and we'll perhaps get to it at some other time. But suffice it to say, meeting this chap, his name is Ajit, it drove home to me a message that really impressed me. And that was that Ajit's willingness, his sort of natural tendency and ease with which he immediately placed my comfort, my security on the same level as his own. And he had just met me, and the only thing he knew that I was going to see Sai Baba, and he was coming to see Sai Baba for the second time. He had come a year before. And I thought, wow, this is so unusual in people, and especially strangers when you meet them. And years later, when I would read or hear Sai Baba urge us to make our lives his message, that initial meeting of this young man at the airport and his taking care of me really for 2.5 days with his family, helping me and so forth, things like that, gave meaning to that request that Swami makes of us to remember that people will know about him by virtue of how they experience our presence and the way we relate to them. And so if we want to spread the message, the best and perhaps the only real good way is by example and by making our lives that example. The second message that I got that time, and I'm still in Bombay, so it was 2.5 days, but I went to very good restaurants. I went to see things. I had lots of comfort, and I met people and I had great conversations, the same kinds of people that I was talking with back in the US. And it dawned upon me that the good advantages and the privileges that I had come to be accustomed to in the United States, it dawned upon me that really I was experiencing the same kinds of things here. And here, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connections. I hadn't worked hard and saved a bank account and had certain kinds of powers and so forth. It made me realize very, very strongly that the good things that happen to me are a function not of my doing, but of God's gift and of God's grace. So again, his teaching about our not being the doer, and his teaching about the debt that each of us should constantly be aware that we have a debt to society. It had real meaning in a very practical, dramatic sense right away. The next big, stupendous impression was how Sathya Sai Baba arranged the moment I first laid eyes on him. We arrived Christmas Eve night at 8 p.m. We were assigned a room, and we were told that the next morning at 4:30, there would be a candlelight procession of Western devotees around the temple, the mandir, and that we were invited to join. So we got down, at least I was invited to join. The Indian devotees would respectfully and graciously sit in the background and give the presumably mostly Christian devotees an opportunity to take part in this candlelight procession around the mandir. So the ladies were in a batch in front, and then the gents behind. And when we circumambulated the mandir and it came up on the other side, up on the balcony, 4:30 a.m., Christmas morning, 1978, first time I saw Sai Baba. He was on the balcony in a white robe, and the devotees had candles lighted and were singing Christmas carols. And it was just an awesomely beautiful experience. And I looked up and I saw him, and I felt a wave of energy, a current just coming down to me, which made me just sink to my knees on the sand. And it was surreal. And I could then look around and again see the candles, lights, flames lighting up. And the song, the carol, the Christmas carol they were singing at that moment was "Joy to the world, the Lord has come." The impact on me was just overwhelming. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. That elevated state of consciousness continued the rest of my visit, my first visit in 78. And I was finding folk from all around the world, from all countries I had heard about and countries I hadn't heard about, who were all behaving in such a sweet and loving manner toward one another, toward me. There were no strangers. Instantly, we were just comfortable. And I felt like, boy, this is what the United Nations has been trying to get since its starting in I remember being so concerned about that in 46, 47. But here's an example, a real concrete example where people, not just different colors, but different languages, different religions, different people from different social strata, interacting in perfect harmony. Wow, it was just so impressive. So that was another teaching that I got right away. And that Swami, in his teachings and his discourses, constantly makes the point that there's no need to leave the religion in which you are brought up in or which you grew up in because you have discovered him. Rather, we should get more deeply engrossed and learn about our religion. And that, it took a while for that message really got me going, but as the years went on, I began to pay attention to that suggestion of his, and I began to, for example, in the last 6, 7 years, I've made really a concentrated effort to study and read, and I can understand so much about what was going on in both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, and that ability to understand, I think, has been facilitated by my understanding the epics about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and so forth, and the way that we've learned about the sages and saints of ancient times. So I've been continually inspired as a function of these experiences, these relatively simple seeming experiences, but having such a profound impact, not just on me, but on most of the folks that I would talk to and exchange conversation with. As Harish pointed out a moment ago, one of the tools that this avatar has given us human beings, to better understand what's going on and what our purpose in life is and how we should be spending our time really here. One of the tools that he's given us is the organization that bears his name, Sai Organization. But it was not, it's not an essential tool. It definitely is one that facilitates and helps and promotes our spiritual advancement. It makes it more easy for us to overcome many of the unforeseen obstacles that are always going to confront us. But a major message was that we would gradually have to adjust to the fact that we as devotees, as individuals, are not really separate from God. And that's just so hard. It's so difficult for us to process that. And particularly when we would gaze upon and have the opportunity to be in the presence of the physical form of the avatar of this age. But the message was stronger and stronger and stronger made. Recognize that I am God, but you too are God. And you've got to come to grips with that and let that become part of your thinking. And it's a lifelong process. Those of us who've been at it for years and years earnestly still have a long way to go, but we've come a long way. And that's the way it is with practice. You just keep practicing and you keep applying. And it's misleading to try to compare our spiritual progress with what we think our neighbor is doing. We will always be confused and misled by that. The only way to compare our spiritual progress is to think in terms of, am I a little bit more soft-spoken, less selfish, more moral, etc.? Am I trying to follow teachings a bit more and succeeding more than I was, say, last week or last month, or last year? And we gauge our progress by looking at ourselves, not at other people. That's misleading. That's another big point. Now that his physical presence among us has ended. We have fortunately been prepared by him to safely and surely reach our goal. And what is the goal? The goal is climbing that mountain back to the source. And as we get higher and higher, the amount of oxygen available is less and less. It's harder to breathe. There are more obstacles. It's more difficult. The hazards of a misstep are more devastating. But we have the assurance by continuing to remember that he's always with us, that he's around us. He hasn't gone anywhere, as a lot of people have recently pointed out, that they've gotten those messages, that he is fully present. But again, as Harish made the point a moment ago, the mind, this beautiful instrument that we have that helps us negotiate this world, this instrument that is more powerful and more brilliant than best computer. It's tremendous, but it has to be kept under control. The mind has to be kept under control because it is meant to be our servant. The inclination it has is to make us its servant. So we have to do things that perhaps at first seem difficult. We have to have self-discipline. We have to do things that Swami teaches us and tells us and urges us to do. But we can do it, and we succeed when we do it even just a little bit, because every time we make an effort, no effort goes for naught. We may not see immediately the evidence that it has moved us forward, but it has. And then later on, we can look back and see what is going on. So we could talk a long, long time. I'm always thrilled, as I said, to have satsang. At the same time, we can talk too much because, as Swami says, when we meet someone on, say, someone who's been thirsty and deprived of water for a long time, and you have a canteen full of water, you don't pour the whole canteen down at one time. You simply give a few drops, and then you and the person that you were hoping to render some sort of assistance to can both begin to benefit from savoring that experience. So it is with the satsang that it's great to have people who have a lot of experience, fortunate experiences when we talk, but all of us, each and every one of us has the same powerful experience. And I always try to urge every one of my sisters and brothers to fall back on his or her own experience, to remember those things, those early moments when we first came to know that God was on the planet and that he actually was embracing us and would continue to embrace us. So I'd like to pause here or stop here or say, I'm putting my ending to this initial little satsang, but again, there are just no words to express my joy at being with you, and I look forward to our continuing to talk and be with one another. And I'm so happy to see that you have these things on a weekly basis. Swami has always stressed it's quality, not quantity, that he likes. And it doesn't matter if he says if something is wrong, it's wrong, even if everybody does it. And if it's right, even if nobody does it. So it behooves us to remember what he has said to us, what he teaches us in his discourses. And as he says, looking to nature, we can learn so much from nature. So we read his discourses and we imbibe his teachings, and we practice to the best of our ability. Jai Sai Ram.